Howdy.
What part of South Australia are we in?
We're in the mid-north. We're about 20 kilometres sort of eastish of Hallett, little mid-north town.
Between the bigger towns?
Burroughs south and Peterborough's north.
Okay.
And we're about halfway between.
And at the start of this video, you can see you walking into a nice old building.
Yes.
What's the background of the building? What's its significance?
Well, this is the birthplace of one of Australia's greatest explorers in the 20th century that hardly anybody knows about. And this is where he was born, in this seemingly desolate place back in 1888.
Was there a significance to his family as colonisers of South Australia?
They came over when the first settlers came to South Australia in 1836. So they were with Governor Hindmarsh and Colonel Light, the surveyor who mapped out the city of Adelaide. But they lived in Adelaide for a while, and they moved up here because the government wanted to dish out smaller parcels of land to people rather than let the big pastoralists have it.
So how did Sir Hubert hit your radar?
Oh, look, I can't remember where I found this book, and it's a second-hand book, so I must have got it in scrounging around in a shop somewhere. But I was fascinated by what I read about it. I've also seen another book written by Peter Fitzsimons, which sort of he turns him into, he's more of a storyteller, and he likes to maybe
enhance,
possibly enhance it with things that he may not know about, but this is a little bit more factual. And there's also a documentary about him too on one of his many travels.
So why don't most Australians know about Sir Hubert, and why should we know about him?
Well, let's go ask the second question first.
Yeah.
He revolutionised exploration. He was an Arctic and an Antarctic explorer, and he said going with sleds and walking and ships that just get frozen in the ice and drift with the current, we're never going to get to the North Pole.
What years are we talking about here? So put it in a context
1920s.
Yeah.
But he was an Arctic explorer. Before he was an Arctic explorer, though, he was a war correspondent for Australia. Worked with Charles Bean and Frank Hurley on the at the Battle of Passchendaele, was where he was thrown in. Where you go, start filming, because he was fascinated by film. Actually, as a young man, he experienced a film event in the Parklands in Adelaide when he came down to go to school. So he was originally a war correspondent, and then he went off to the Arctic, and they wanted to explore, and he wandered around there for 3 years, and finally came back. But the future for him was in planes, and in particular, one thing that just sparked his imagination was a submarine under the sea at the North Pole, under the ice. And he's best known, there's a bit of infamy surrounding Hubert Wilikns too. He came to do some work for the British Museum in Australia, and he spent a couple of years in the bush and the desert, and he saw what the progress of European development was doing to the Aboriginal people, and he made a comment, we're the poorest rich nation on earth, based on what he saw about our treatment of the Indigenous people, and a lot of people never forgave him for that.
Is that why he's not on North Terrace?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He did contribute greatly. The other thing that he didn't have any qualifications. He could fly a plane. He learned to fly a plane in the early days, but he didn't have a pilot's license.
Yeah.
His vision was to have a series of weather stations around the North Pole and around the South Pole, gathering data to plan.
That is progressive for the time.
It was very progressive. I mean, it's happened now in other ways, but he even envisaged people looking down at space, and before even the International Space Station was thought of, and that was one thing that he touched on at some point in his many journals.
So what was his legacy? Whether it's good or bad?
He opened up thousands of kilometres of coastline. He was the one that found out that there was no solid land in the Arctic Circle at the North Pole, unlike the Antarctic and the South Pole. He's said to be the first person to fly across the North Pole, which is disputed by an Admiral Byrd, who claims to have done it, but the evidence doesn't stack up for Byrd, according to many sources.
Yeah, there's information out there.
He did the same in Antarctica. He mapped and opened up thousands of square kilometres for research. He was a researcher.
Do you want to give a quick summary of his submarine experience?
Well, that was his undoing in the end, unfortunately. What gave him... then people were a bit more reluctant to put money into his projects, but he was the first person to sail a submarine into the Arctic Ocean. They were going to go under the North Pole with this submarine, but there was theories about why they couldn't do it. The dive planes had broken off the back of the submarine, but it appeared to some people that it could have been sabotaged. Because these submarines, this is a World War I submarine that he was given in 1931 for an annual rental fee of $1 by the US Navy, but it was not seaworthy, and they tried to make it seaworthy, but he did turn it into a research project and collected valuable data, which was confirmed by later North Pole sea expeditions by mainly the US Navy, who took them another 30 years to send a submarine under the North Pole.
So the restoration of his birthplace, how did that come about?
Dick Smith, Australian entrepreneur and pilot and a bit of an explorer, he found out about this place, and it was just a pile of rubble. So in 1999 they began restoring this, and it only took them 2 years, and it was officially opened in 2001, and they're slowly fixing it up better and better all the time. And here it is, this beautiful old style building.
It's beautiful.
And when you stand here and look around, you sort of think there was pretty hard times in that. I mean, he used to walk or ride a horse 9 miles, so we're talking about 15 kilometres, to school every day.
Established a bit of resilience in his character, maybe,
absolutely.
his future adventures.
He was confident, he wasn't afraid of much, and although he never had any tertiary qualifications, he gained knowledge. He was good with his hands, he was good with his head. He's one of those people that can store information and also work with his hands. He loved working on motors and things.
When you've talked to me about him while you're reading the book, you also mentioned that he didn't seek notoriety.
No, he wasn't after fame. Part of being a polar explorer in those days, you had Roll Amundsen and others, Scott, Shackleton. They wanted fame. That was part of the deal. But he was sort of working in the background, and it was very difficult for him to raise money by not putting himself out the front. William Randolph Hearst pumped a bit of money into some of his projects, but he was a ruthless man, and he did it so he could sell papers. And unfortunately, Wilkins sometimes had to maybe sell his soul to the devil to get some money. But he died in 1959, and then the USS Skate submarine surfaced at the North Pole, and they spread his ashes there. He did a lot of work for the American military, and 16 years later, when his wife died, they took her ashes up there so they could be together.
Lovely.
Because they spent a lot of time apart while he was exploring.
So any last thoughts or words?
Oh, look, I just think we should probably recognise this guy a bit more, and maybe if more people read books like this, or even the one Peter Fitzsimons wrote, and there's other documents, there's a bit of really good footage on places like YouTube that you can watch him make movies of what he did.
We could maybe add the links.
Well, yes, we could put some information there, and there you go. That's roughly the story of Sir George Hubert Wilkins, who also won the Military Cross twice without being a soldier.